Good afternoon, everybody. This is Sophie from English Australia. Thanks for coming to today's webinar. Our presenters for today are Katherine Olston, who's the Director at the Centre for English Teaching at Sydney University. And Katherine was a member of the team that won the Innovation Award in 2017. So thanks for coming along today, Katherine. The other presenter, it's an innovation conversation. So the other person who you'll hear during the webinar is Kath Moore from ETS TOEFL. Kath's a very, very experienced ELT consultant, and she works in professional development for ETS TOEFL. And ETS TOEFL are committed sponsors of the English Australia Award for Innovation. So thanks for coming and presenting today's webinar as well, Kath. So you won't see Kath Moore on the webcam, but you will see Katherine Olston, so don't get confused. Also, if your webcam is in an inconvenient place on your screen, like it might be blocking the PowerPoint slides, then you can just move it over with your cursor and also minimize it from the corner with your cursor. All right, well, I think we'll get started. So I'll pass over to Kath Moore from ETS TOEFL.
Okay. All right, so my name's Kath, and I'm just going to give an outline of what we're going to do today once the slide decides to move. And it doesn't seem to want to move for me. Sophie, would you mind just moving that slide? It seems to be doing odd things for me. Thank you. I'll try again. So first, I'm just going to give an overview of what we're going to cover this afternoon. Katherine and I have presented on this topic before, and as the innovation nominations for English Australia are going to be opening up very soon, we thought it might be time to revisit last year's award-winning nomination, which is the Academic Skills for University Success series of MOOCs. And these are some of the topics that we're going to cover. But before we start the conversation, I would like to actually start with a question to you in the audience. And this is the question: how would you define innovation? What I would like you to do is, you'll see a chat function on the right hand of the screen as you're sitting facing it. And if you can type in what you think there, Sophie will share what some of people's ideas are about what innovation is in the context of the ELICOS industry. So I'll just give you a little bit of time to do that. Also, as we're going throughout the conversation, Katherine might raise some points that, or talk about some things that you want to ask further questions about. So I would ask that you actually post your questions also in the chat function as we go through, and we will try and cover them at the end of the session.
Okay, so keep typing in your answers to how you would define innovation in the context of ELICOS. We've got some answers that have come through. Someone has said finding new ways to help students improve their skills. Another person has said creative solutions to pressing issues. Someone said innovation is change for the improvement of a service or a product. And another person, offering something different, a course or an idea not yet popular that is unique.
Okay, that's actually great.
There's one more.
And it covers pretty much. Okay, sorry.
Yep, to scaffold in creative ways to suit the students and to try out new approaches.
That's excellent. You've pretty much covered all the aspects of innovation that we look at when we're looking at the Innovation Award. If I just can go to the next screen. Whoops, sorry. So innovation, as is defined for the Innovation Award, you can see on the screen there. And as people mentioned, it can be an idea, it can be a process, it can be a product. If you look at the third point there, a key thing is the student experience or student need. It doesn't have to be something big. It can be something quite small, and it can, as somebody rightly said, it can be an approach. What it must do is improve the quality and value of your offerings. And here I'm talking about in context of the award, and improve the student experience. So as you have said, it can be a course, it can be learner resources, it can be teacher resources, it can be a management tool, it can be technology used in an interesting way, it can even be a methodology. What I would suggest, if you're wanting examples or wanting to compare what you're doing at your centre to past awards to see what things have actually come up and been an award-winning idea, if you go to the link of the website down the bottom there, that will take you through to our past award winners, and you'll see that there has been a variety of different approaches to innovation that have actually become award-winning ideas. So, as I said, if you have questions as we go through our chat with Katherine, please post them in the comments in the chat bar, and Sophie will cover them for us at the end of the session. What I'd like to do now is let us hear from Katherine, and one of the things that the team of judges noticed with last year's nominations in general was how centres were actually using digital tools to potentially broaden their reach and broaden the impact of the ELICOS industry. And a lot of those tools were being used to have more of a global focus. And this was most notably reflected in the Centre for English Teaching from Sydney University's series of MOOCs. So my first question to Katherine is, can you tell us a little bit about your award-winning academic skills for success specialisation?
Thanks, Kath. So let's see. Here we go. So our academic skills for university success specialisation is a series of 5 MOOCs. So MOOCs is massive open online course. And we aimed to create a series of courses that prepared students for undergraduate study at an English medium university. And we were particularly interested in targeting learners at a global cohort of learners, both international and domestic, native and non-native speaker, because our idea was that academic culture and academic language is no one's first language. So everyone can benefit from this kind of input or course, I guess. And also the MOOCs focused, you can see here in the hexagon, the MOOCs focused, there was 5 MOOCs, and they focused on information and digital literacy, problem solving and creativity, critical thinking, and communication as well. And then there's a capstone MOOC that sort of finishes off all of the other 5 MOOCs. And in the capstone MOOC, the expectation is that students have done the other 4 MOOCs before doing it, and that they draw on all the skills and knowledge they've built through the first 4 MOOCs, and they kind of put it into practice in the capstone in a more practical way. And it was delivered on the Coursera platform, which is one of the major MOOC platforms as well.
So one of the key things that we spoke about was with innovation is that it actually identifies a student need and often arises out of a student need. So Katherine, can you talk a little bit about how the team determined that there was a need, and that using the MOOC was the best platform to address this need?
Yeah. Okay. So in terms of the innovation growing out of student need, as you've commented on, Kath, let's just wait the slide. There we go. So it had become evident anecdotally that there was a sort of need to fill in this university preparation space. And this was coming out of conversations with the university, with lecturers, and from students. And that was about this sort of level of preparedness to engage in the academic landscape of the university when they got there. And then in order to kind of, I guess, further investigate if this need was sort of a real need, I guess, we did some sort of concrete research or investigations, and this involved a number of things. So one thing we did was we did a review of the first year university experience literature and transition pedagogy. And this helped to start identifying areas of focus for the courses. We also, just go to the next one. So we also then referred to the University of Sydney strategic plan, and in the strategic plan it identified graduate qualities that students need to be successful at university, but then also in the world of work when they leave. And we drew the topics for the MOOCs from the University of Sydney strategic plan, and the graduate qualities are exactly what we based the MOOC on: information and digital literacy, problem solving, critical thinking, and communication. We then did a content analysis across all of the faculties of the graduate attributes. And this was particularly important for the MOOCs and making sure we met student need, because the MOOCs are aimed at students going into any faculty at university. So it was very, very important to ensure that we were sort of meeting the general needs of students before they go into their specific discipline. And in sort of doing this content analysis across all the faculties, it allowed us to identify key themes that were common across all faculties. And that was very important in sort of then informing the learning outcomes as well. We also looked at the 21st Century Skills Framework, which identifies the knowledge, skills, attitudes, values, and ethics that students need to survive in the world of work and at university. And these aligned quite well with the graduate qualities in the University of Sydney strategic plan, and also the graduate attributes. Now, all this research was great because it looked at the literature and strategic plans, etc. But then we wanted to really get, I guess, an idea of student needs from the perspective of students and also the lecturers at university. So these are the people who come into contact with the students and have first-hand experience of their needs for that context. So what we did was we did online surveys and also face-to-face interviews with university faculty and support staff, and actually also students, to really get an idea of what the needs were. And the surveys in particular were great for identifying kind of extracurricular needs, sort of things like where to go to find support or access support, and also other things like how do you word your email to your lecturer appropriately, things like that. So kind of less direct academic skills, but more kind of skills that allowed students to participate appropriately in the academic culture of the university. So all of this research yielded insights about the general need, also the specific areas of academic and extracurricular need, as I just mentioned, and also directly informed the learning outcomes. So we kind of got all this information from the research and then filtered it out into the learning outcomes and the modules of focus for all of the different MOOCs. Now, in terms of the MOOC platform meeting student needs, Sydney University were embarking on an effort to jump into the MOOC space, I guess. So we always knew that we were going to work with MOOCs for this project. But it was actually, I guess, fortuitous that the MOOC delivery mode actually also met students' needs in terms of both access and functionality. So in terms of access, the MOOC platform online, and also the sense that it's not only open to enrolled students at the university, anyone in the world can enroll, so it's open to a global cohort of learners. It's also able to be accessed from anywhere in the world. And if it's aimed, if there's students who are coming to university in Australia, for example, they can do the MOOC pre-arrival and then also post-arrival and during their studies. So there's flexibility in that sense. It's also self-paced, so it's recommended that students do each MOOC over 6 weeks with about 4 hours of study per week. However, they can dip in and out, they can do it at their own pace, etc. So that also allows wider access in terms of students with different personal and professional commitments being able to do the MOOC around their own life and fit it in that sense. And then also the MOOCs have an audit option, so they're free. So in terms of access, again, I guess the scope is wider for the target audience because it's free. They don't have to pay. And this also, I guess, allows them to dip in and out. They don't necessarily have to do the whole course. They can choose areas that they want to focus on as well. In terms of functionality, just a few examples of how the MOOC platform meets students' needs are things like the live transcripts that accompany the videos. And so you see the sort of it's underlined where the person's talking, where you're up to in the transcript. Also things like the ability to put in-video questions in to prompt active participation from the learners and increase engagement. And also the ability to provide extensive feedback at the option level, so for each question on the quizzes, and that also allows students to kind of be a bit more autonomous when they're working through the MOOCs.
So, Katherine, I think it's really interesting what you've been talking about in terms of the student need. A couple of things were really highlighted to me. One, the really strong evidence base. So you started off with saying, well, we had an idea anecdotally, but you went through the steps of really making sure that the student need was firmly identified and you could actually prove that there was a need. The other thing that I think in terms of working out the platform that you're using in terms of a MOOC, I know you're going to talk about this later. One, you started with your identification of a student need, looking at theory as well. So you've looked at you've done research and you've grounded it in theory. And for those people who are thinking about putting a nomination in, there are two key aspects, because we do ask to identify the student need and explain how it was identified, and also to show how it's grounded in methodology. So I think the things that you've raised there are really important for people who are thinking of nominating. But the other thing that I think is really great about this particular innovation is the fact that the approach is not just looking at the language student in the language centre. It's looking at the life of the student. So it's addressing the need while they're at the language centre and beyond, and it's been a tool to engage more broadly with the stakeholders that your students are part of. So I think that's really, really important. And yep, go on.
Oh no, thanks for raising that, Kath, because that was actually sort of, I guess, a surprising or unintended consequence of developing the MOOCs. By going out and talking to the academics and the support staff like the library, etc., we actually, CET as a centre, forged a lot of connections with faculty and the wider university that we didn't have before that. Right. And it also kind of showed or demonstrated to the university CET's role in preparing students for study as well. So it was a very valuable part of the process. Yeah.
Okay. Can you spend a little bit of time now talking about the process of how you actually developed the 5 MOOCs?
Yeah, definitely. So it was a massive undertaking, and there's a lot of different things I can talk about with process. So there's things like the multi-layered spreadsheets to track workflow and all that sort of stuff. But I won't talk about that in detail today, but if anyone does have any questions about that sort of more project management side of it, I'm happy to talk about it later. But what I thought I'd focus on today was the kind of pedagogical approaches of working with the MOOC platform. And these aren't necessarily unique to the MOOC platform, but they do have some sort of applicability in the online space as well, and the blended learning too. So we knew that we had to work with the Coursera platform. So in the process of developing the MOOCs, it was really important to understand all of the pedagogical tools and approaches that were sort of available to us through the MOOC platform. And these are things like video lectures, things like, and you're probably already familiar with these things, screencasts, so we got the video lectures produced professionally. Screencasts we did in-house to demonstrate concepts, whereas the video lectures were more sort of content dissemination, I guess. There's also IVQs in the Coursera platform, which are in-video questions that are inserted in the video, and then students have to answer a question or a poll or something while they're watching the video. Also things like obviously quizzes, multiple choice quizzes, etc. And then also what I mentioned before, the option level feedback that goes with quizzes, discussion boards, of course, and the peer assessment functionality of the MOOCs. So it was really important for us as a team first to get a real handle on the resources that were available to us within the MOOC platform. And I guess coming from a communicative language teaching approach, it was also important to accept the constraints of the online space, because these are very different to the constraints and the affordances of the face-to-face teaching kind of space. So once we'd sort of accepted that, we tried to understand the constraints, but also the affordances. So within these tools, what could we do to make it more effective for learners? And these were things like the video lectures, making sure that there's consistency in delivery. So boring things like setting up templates, style guides, etc. for the video lectures. So there's a consistency. So learners are kind of secure. They know what to expect with the video lectures. Other things like within the quizzes, deciding on the wording of instructions to make this consistent. Again, so learners didn't need to waste time or cognitive space kind of deciphering instructions. Across all 5 MOOCs, the instructions are consistent. So all that sort of thing, we had to work through all that. So for the first 4 MOOCs, I guess that was kind of, we used the Coursera platform and we used the affordances there. In the first 4 MOOCs too, we wanted to then start to sort of stretch the limits of what the platform could do. And this is where I feel the real sort of innovation starts to come into play. So we first developed a confidence dashboard, and this is a customized tool. So this is a plug-in to Coursera. We developed this with Smart Sparrow, and this is where students self-assess their confidence levels against the learning outcomes for the unit, and they assess them before and after completing the module. And so you can see this graph that the learners see here. You can see the greys before doing the module, their confidence level, and then after doing the module. And this was particularly useful in showing learners how they progressed. And because it's self-reported, so it's just learner confidence levels, it also allows it to be automated. So you don't need teacher feedback in this. And this is really important when you're talking about addressing the scalability of MOOCs and the number of learners that you often get in MOOCs. So that's how we sort of innovated in the first 4 MOOCs. And then in the capstone MOOC, so the 5th MOOC that I mentioned before, we really, really wanted to stretch the boundaries of what the platform could do. So in doing this, we developed interactive, personalised, adaptive and multi-part lesson and project book. And we worked together with Smart Sparrow on this. And this is where students are scaffolded through the process of creating a project proposal to address a real-world problem in their community. And we, moving from a kind of more content consumption approach, which MOOCs tend to take, and our MOOCs did, MOOCs 1 to 4, we wanted to move into a content production and a more active role of the learner. And so this is where our capstone came into play. And we followed an inquiry-based learning approach where students are given a challenging task relevant to their interests. So they chose their own interest area, their own problem in their community. They're given access to specific resources, and these were things like linking back to the other MOOCs and reminding them of the things they'd learnt in the other MOOCs and getting them to apply those knowledges, that knowledge in the capstone, and then also providing them with kind of personalised feedback and guidance as they went through the process. And the whole approach of the capstone was to scaffold them through that process of what it means to be a student at university, what it means to come up with ideas, to research those ideas, to filter out the ideas, and then to produce a piece of text that you would then submit for assignment. So it really takes a really, I guess, detailed step-by-step approach for students for how they might sort of go about undertaking an assignment and creating a sort of piece of work for an assignment. And at this level, pre-arrival, sort of pre-university, that kind of detailed support or high-level support is quite important. All of these, all of our learning design was informed also by the Coursera best practice principles in online learning. So that was a really useful kind of framework, I guess, to guide the learning design as well. I think we're on. Yeah, okay.
So I think, again, you've raised some interesting points about using tools. So you had no choice about the MOOC, and the MOOC of choice was Coursera, and actually working with the limitations, and it sounds like that helped push innovation. So you, as a team, I'm not wanting to put words into your mouth, did you have to sit down and work out, okay, this is what we want to do, this isn't going to do it, how are we going to move on from there?
Yes, absolutely. And I think that's, you know, when I mentioned getting over the barrier of coming from, all of us were coming from a background of being communicative English language teachers. And as you start something, you think, wow, we could do this and we could do this and we want to do this. And then as you kind of go through the process, you need to reconcile those grand ideas with the tools that you have available and the tools that you're compelled to use, and then also the resources that you have available. So like the videos are actually a really good example of that. You can spend a lot of money on videos. We could have had aerial shots of the Sydney Harbour and all that sort of thing. But because we had a certain amount of sort of resources to work with, we had to look carefully at what we wanted to do with the videos and the style that we wanted to use with them. And we realized, well, it's actually not appropriate to have, we don't really need, you know, scenic shots in the videos. We don't even really need sort of expensive animation, because if we're talking about an academic context, the style of the talking head video actually aligns quite well with the academic context and the purpose of what we're aiming for. So I guess just working with those resources, but then also making very conscious decisions about how you modify things to meet those resources as well. Making sure that the decisions are appropriate.
Right. I remember you saying last year, and you raised again just a few minutes ago, you were talking about the importance of consistency in presentation and using a style guide. And I remember that actually resonated with the audience that we were talking to, because they hadn't considered that, and it was in terms of developing digital tools and the importance of that actually making it easier for the student and the importance of taking the time. So did you realise that at the beginning or as part of the process?
I think MOOC 1 was very good in taking us through those lessons, I guess, because as you start, and if you've got, at that stage we had 3 different people working on it. So then you'd sort of look at a quiz, for example, that one person had written and a quiz that another person had written, and you'd realise that the instructions were different. Like it might say click on one answer or choose one answer or select one answer. So you could start to see the discrepancies across them. So that's when that need for the consistency arose, and then we started to put those kind of templates in place as well.
And I think the other thing that you keep mentioning is the process. So obviously, in terms of developing the MOOC, it was a process and an iterative process that you built on lessons that had been previously learnt and feedback from students. Would that be correct?
Yes, actually, and a really important part of the process too was the beta testing of the MOOCs before they were launched. So we were lucky enough with Coursera, they recruited learners for the beta testing. So about 2 weeks before launch, there was about 20 beta testers, like real learners in the MOOC, and they'd do the MOOCs and they'd like or dislike content, they'd comment on it, etc. And then we'd get a report on the learning design and the MOOC in general, etc. And then we could modify it before launch. Okay. So that was a really important part of the process. Yeah.
Okay. Before we move on to how you measured the effectiveness, Sophie tells me that there is a question. So Sophie, would you like to ask the question?
Yeah, there was an audience question just on what you were saying. Someone wanted to know if you encountered resistance from the faculties in accessing the content that you required. And if you did, how did you counter this?
Yes, that's a good question. We didn't actually encounter resistance from the faculties because we did our own research on all of the topics. So we used the literature, etc., to inform the content and design. So in that sense, we didn't have to ask the faculties for permission. We only had to ask the faculties when we wanted to use some of the units of study outlines in the assessment tasks or as examples. And faculty were really, really obliging and into it, surprisingly enough. And they were also really keen to participate in the video interviews, etc. I think also because the MOOCs actually sit outside of what they do every day, so it wasn't really seen as a threat or an overlap with what they do.
Great. The same person wanted to know if you had any plans to develop a MOOC for postgrad students.
That's a good question as well. We've actually found that a lot of postgrad students have given us feedback that the MOOCs are really valuable for them at their level as well. so that's I guess that's a nice surprising thing. At the moment, we don't have any plans to develop any more MOOCs for postgraduate students, but maybe in the future.
So let's move on now to talking about measuring the outcomes and how effective MOOC was. So, you know, at the beginning you talked about how you used evidence to identify the student need, and you made sure it was grounded in research. And there are tools built into the MOOCs to ensure that you have some kind of feedback. So can you talk a little bit of detail about what you have done in terms of measuring the effectiveness of the MOOC?
Yeah.
The MOOCs, sorry, plural.
So I mentioned the beta testing, and that was a really important part of the process. Okay. So in MOOC land and often in educational technology land, people love measuring numbers, particularly in MOOCs, of course. And so if you were going to measure it in numbers, we have 43,057 total learners in the MOOCs to date. And that's an exciting number, but we all know, I guess, that that doesn't necessarily mean that courses are effective in any way. It might just mean that lots of people are jumping in and having a look at them, which is good in itself, but you know, in terms of meeting learning outcomes, it's not very indicative really. So there's other ways that we measure effectiveness and also learner satisfaction, I guess. And Coursera is quite good in providing a certain level of analytics to enable measurement at I guess a bit more of a superficial level. So we have things like learner feedback, and across all of the courses we have an average of 4.5 stars from learners for the MOOC, so that's quite good. Now within the platform as well, learners can like or dislike content, quizzes, videos, everything, and this is from the problem solving MOOC. This is the percentage of likes and dislikes across the course. So that's also good. A great thing about this as well is that you can drill down and you can see where the dislikes are, and then you can go and address them if you need to. So for example, if one quiz question's particularly confusing and everyone's disliking it, you can go and change it. Or likewise, you can go and realise that you can't change anything and you just leave it the same and accept the 3% of dislikes. Also, with our learner confidence dashboard, as I mentioned, it was a customised tool, we can monitor the increase, so hopefully increase, but we can see it was an increase, in the learner confidence levels throughout the modules and then throughout the MOOC. So just as an example, you can see that there was a 50% increase in confidence with the learning outcomes with learners completing Module 1 of the first MOOC, the Information and Digital Literacy MOOC. So that's always also a way of measuring learner perceptions of, I guess, effectiveness and confidence. Now, because the MOOCs have been launched now for almost a year, all 5 of them, now we've got a little bit of headspace, and what we're going to do is really sort of drill down into how effective the MOOCs are. So what we're going to do is we're going to undertake a research project in collaboration with the Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences about the effectiveness of the critical thinking MOOC in sort of improving first-year students' critical thinking skills. And we'll be looking at students in first-year advanced French, and if doing the MOOC increases their ability to express critical thinking skills and their understanding of critical thinking skills as well. So that's quite exciting, because that's an opportunity to sort of get some more in-depth data on how effective the MOOCs are. So yeah, that's exciting.
So is that being driven by CET, or is it a co-partnership, or?
It's been being driven by both CET and a particular academic in the Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences. So it's always, of course, so valuable to have academics who are advocates and keen to pick up something like this and use it in their faculty, because it is voluntary. But so it's great that she's really into using it with her students and collaborating with us on this.
Right. So do you think it might be a catalyst for further innovation?
Yes, I do actually. Innovation perhaps in terms of how lecturers might use this kind of thing to support their units of study. Right. Because it's a sort of ready-made support resource for students, and often lecturers say that they don't have time to focus on the more remedial, for want of a better word, kind of support that some students need, because the lecturers need to focus on the content of their unit of studies. So if they could recommend these sort of self-study resources, then that could sort of bring about innovation in how they offer support as well, perhaps.
Right. Okay. So what you've shared so far is fantastic. It's very detailed, and I think it's really given us an insight into the innovation and the innovative process. Can I ask you to finish with what you think are some lessons that the team have learned through this process?
So, let's see. So we've learned a lot of lessons, and here I've just sort of tried to give some general lessons that hopefully can help other people in their own innovations. So really be clear about the purpose, why are you doing it, what's your aim, and what is the benefit to learners. Because if there's no obvious benefit to learners, especially something that's voluntary, there's not going to be uptake on it. Also things like clearly articulate your conceptual and pedagogical underpinnings and approach, because that helps you to be clear about your purpose, how you're going to realise the purpose, and it also acts as a framework for the team and the project to move forward. And it sort of defines the limitations and the scope of the project as well. In these kind of projects too, of course, it's not a one-person show, and it's really important to build the team that's going to work together, really build the skills in the team and the collaborative capacity of the team. Because that sort of ability to work collaboratively and bounce ideas off each other and grow as a team is really, really valuable and really satisfying as well. Research and plan well. So this goes back to the research I was talking about, but also how you plan the time, how you plan the resources, how you plan templates, how you plan everything. It will help drive the project forward, keep it on track, allow you to meet deliverables that are perhaps and deadlines that are being sort of put on you from various directions, etc. And it'll make the process more pleasurable as well, I think. Consider the details and make informed decisions. So details are really, really important. I spoke about the videos and the necessity or the advantage of having a template, etc. We also looked in detail in the videos at things like what we were wearing, if what we were wearing conflicted with the brand, the Sydney Uni sort of colour brand, if our hair was sticking up when we were in the video, if our necklace was funny, all that sort of thing. So all those details, I guess, contribute to the sort of over the quality that's sort of conveyed by what you do. And then so that goes into all those decisions that you make along the way as well.
Right.
And then finally, let's see, final bubble, it's gone. Here we go. Be brave, learn new things and develop new skills, because innovating, you're never going to be following a pre-established roadmap. You're always going to be kind of going into new territories. It's okay if you don't know how to make videos before you start. Learn as you go along and use the planning and the sort of being clear about your approach to guide you with that. And just jump in and try it if you can. Yeah, that's my advice.
Okay. Katherine, thank you for what you've done throughout this session. I know that when the MOOCs were begun, you weren't thinking, okay, there's an award up here, let me make sure the MOOC matches the award. And obviously that's not what people do. In ELICOS, we see innovation in so many different ways, shapes and forms. And in terms of a methodological approach, a way of engaging with students or creating engagement with students in the community more, assessment tools, a whole range of things. And I think one of the key lessons that you have here is developing the new skills. And that seems to be a common theme in innovations that I've seen over the years in ELICOS. That one, you actually find people who actually have the skills that you didn't know that can contribute to a project, or because people are willing to give it a go, they do actually develop new skills. So you don't have to have all the answers to start. But
no,
I think
exactly right. Yeah.
And I think what you've said is, like starting with, we have a need, there is a problem, we have a solution, and working with a team to find the solution and within the constraints of a tool that you're able to access, being able to develop and think innovatively about that. And I think that's really something that teachers in our industry do pretty much every day.
Yes, absolutely, definitely. And it's important to remember too that innovation doesn't have to be this massive thing. It can be small improvements and developments.
Yes, and I think also if people look back at other award-winning centres, you will see that there are a whole range of different things, and it has been an approach or a way of teaching reading, for example, or pronunciation. It's been a whole range of things. Yep. I want to finish, we've got about 10 minutes to go, and I'd like to finish with some tips actually on how to put together a good nomination, because one of the challenges I think is people have a brilliant thing that's happening in their workplace that they've developed, but taking the time and having the time to put together a nomination that actually clearly showcases the innovative aspects of that is important. But before I do that, I just want to see if anyone has any questions. Yes, and Sophie has responded saying, yes, there are questions. So what I'd like to do is leave time for questions. If we run out of time, there are tips for innovation, tips on the last slide, and there are resources on the website, English Australia website, and the link is there. But my probably key thing would be when you're doing a nomination, answer the question. But I want to leave time for Katherine's questions for Katherine. So if we run out of time for the tips for the nomination, I direct you to the final slide, and there is a video on there, and I think there's also a handout that you can download about how to write a good nomination. So Sophie, questions you said.
Yeah, okay, great. So these are questions for you, Katherine Olston. How long did each stage of the project last? So what was your time frame?
Yeah, good question. So one MOOC took about 2 months to make, which was pretty quick. And that's sort of when we had all the systems in place and we were kind of chugging along. but it was, we were working to capacity to get them done in 2 months. The thing is also that before we started actually going into production, there was probably about a year or even a little bit more build up to it. So that was where you sort of talking to different people in the university, talking to Coursera, the MOOC provider, setting it up, researching about sort of the general area, because we were originally maybe thinking about doing something with just English language, etc. So overall, it probably took about 2.5 years, the whole project.
Okay, thank you. Someone wanted to know what your opinion is on this question about, are there managerial styles in ELICOS or education that can support innovation, or others that might hinder innovation?
Good question.
Yes. That's a good question, actually. I would say definitely having that kind of managerial style where you trust that people can learn new skills and you give them a bit of space and leeway to learn those new skills. So it's kind of creating an environment where they feel safe to develop those skills on the job. I think that's really important, and you give them that encouragement as they go along. Also an environment where you are collaborating to a certain extent in the teams, and you are taking on board and listening to, and I guess there needs to be an element of sort of debate in there as well, new ideas and sorting through things too. When I worked with the team, I wasn't the director of the Centre for English Teaching, so that may have actually helped because I was closer in the structure to the team as well. I don't know if that's necessarily something to consider, but it might be, depending on the team and the project, etc. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, it does, absolutely. Okay. Another person has asked, if you were to create another MOOC or edit these MOOCs, would you do anything differently?
Not to edit these MOOCs. I think maybe some little edits, but I think they're out there in the world and we've got to research them and see how they're going. If I made another MOOC, I would try and play with some different styles of video, and what I'd love to do is maybe do a MOOC that's for a targeted audience. So you've got maybe a smaller, but it's actually not about the numbers, but a group of learners working through it and have a lot more tutor engagement and do more sort of weekly check-ins or impromptu videos and have more interaction with the learners, like personalised interaction, because our 5 MOOCs are really designed to be very low tutor interaction and kind of just run by themselves. But I think it'd be really interesting to have more tutor involvement, work with the cohort as they go through, use Twitter and some other kind of social media platforms to really generate the rapport and the community with the group of learners and the tutors. Activate it a bit more.
Okay, great, thank you. All right, well, that's it for the questions. Kath, did you want to quickly talk about the nominations?
Okay.
You've got a little bit of time.
Got a couple of minutes.
Yeah.
All right. So one of the key things for the nomination is, as I said earlier, is there are want to move. There are an amazing number of things that are happening in the industry, and the tips have slipped to the side of the page, but that's okay. And sometimes it's how they're presented in the nomination that might actually hide what the innovation is. So my tips are: be inspired by previous winners. Listen to, so on the website there is already a video from the 2016 winner, and they talk very specifically about the questions in the nomination. So read about those who have won previously, and that might actually help you identify innovative practice that exists in your centre. Before you write your nomination, look at the resources on the website. They're there to help you and make it easier.
There are some examples of written examples as well of good answers for the different questions.
Yes,
on the
I've
nomination
actually got
form.
it in front of me. There's a 3-page write a good nomination for the award for innovation. So it's not a cheat sheet, it's a tip sheet. So answer the questions. Sometimes people read the question and write something different. So the same as we tell our students, make it easier for the reader, answer the questions. The link there on that page is to the 2016 presenter winners, and the other links are there as well. But do use the resources. I know people don't have a lot of time, so the sheet that tells you the questions and kind of answers that you need to put down are really, really useful. And if you know previous winners, have a chat to them and, find out what they did. Because every year we're getting a larger number of nominations for the award, which is fantastic. Don't do your innovation a disservice by not carefully crafting your award to really showcase what you have done, your potentially award-winning nomination. Yes. And that's probably all I'd like to say.
Yeah, and I think just on that point of what Kath said about us getting more and more nominations, we were at the stage last year where we were thinking, do we need to have different categories for the nominations because we were getting so many? But we're going to just keep it all as one. But I think my point is that it doesn't, the innovation doesn't necessarily have to be on an academic innovation.
No.
Any part of your organisation. So we're seeing more and more innovations coming through in the area of admissions, for example, marketing, certainly in student welfare and student services. So don't disconsider other areas as well.
That's correct, yep.
Okay, so was that it from you, Kath?
It's it from me, yes, except to say thank you, Katherine.
Thank you both, and thank you everyone for attending and listening.
Yeah, and I'd just like to thank both of our presenters today, also to ETS TOEFL, our committed award sponsors. And I'd just like to let the audience know that the nominations for the English Australia Awards will be opening on the 3rd of April. So you can definitely start thinking about if there's an innovation within your centre that you would like to nominate. Thank you everyone for coming along.
That's great. Thank you.
Thanks.